This podcast is brought to you by The Current. Ever wanted to sit down to a candid conversation with the marketing leaders of the world's biggest brands? The Current podcast is your chance. On The Current podcast, you'll find exclusive interviews with the experts and trendsetters who are on the front lines of digital advertising, and they always leave the ad tech jargon at the door. Subscribe to The Current at www.thecurrent.com or anywhere you get your podcast today. This podcast is brought to you by AdRoll. AdRoll is a name a lot of advertisers are probably familiar with. A leader in high-performance digital advertising for 15 years, AdRoll is a brand you can trust to deliver strong ROI across display, native, and paid social campaigns in one platform. Get in touch with an account expert or create a self-service account at adroll.com/ARI today. That's adroll.com/ARI today. Welcome to the Marketecture Podcast. I'm Ari Paparo. We have a special episode today. I'm recording live from the IAB Tech Lab event in London. So that's a treat to hear what's going on here on the other side of the pond. And then Joe and Eric will be doing News of the Week back in New York. I'll have to reach out with my hot takes next week. We have some exciting news. So last week I teased that we had an announcement. We are announcing the first ever Marketecture Live. It's an all-day conference like no other. We're applying the Marketecture ethos to this event with expert speakers of all kinds going deep on the most important topic of the day, identity. So we're covering sandbox, cookie alternatives, PETs, everything else that a modern student of digital advertising needs to know. And best of all, we will have no panels. That's right. Panels are your excuse to check your phone and play Wordle. We're not doing that. No panels. We'll have individual speakers and fireside chats only. All right. Go to marketecturelive.com to reserve your spot. It is on March 17th. It's actually St. Patrick's Day, so we might have green beer at the cocktail hour. So marketecturelive.com. Early bird tickets are 20% off. And if you're a paid Marketecture subscriber, it's 40% off. That's an unbelievable deal for subscribers. I'd actually recommend maybe just becoming a subscriber at marketecture.tv to get the discount on the event. Then it's a twofer. So please check it out. And of course, I'm open to feedback on speakers, on sponsors, on everything else. So you know how to reach me. So let's get into this week's pod. I'm Ari Paparo. I'm here today in London at the IAB Tech Summit, International Tech Summit. I'm joined by Shelley Singh, who is the COO and EVP of Product for the IAB Tech Lab. Shelley, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Ari. Thanks for having me.
So what brings you to London?
It's our international summit. It's an annual thing that we do in the first or second week of November.
And the IAB Tech Lab is a global organization because the IAB itself is per country. Is that right?
That's right. So there are about 46 IABs. They focus on the local, regional, regulatory, and other aspects. So they're all based on the region. Tech Lab focuses on the technology standards. So we are a global organization. Our charter is global. We work with all of them.
Right. Yeah, I have to ask, what's the smallest IAB? There's 46. Is there like an IAB Vatican?
Isn't a Vatican one, but I guess there'll be some, probably some European countries.
Luxembourg has an IAB?
Luxembourg.
Okay. But tech matters the same around the world, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's the same browser.
Same browsers, right. What are the differences? Europe sees the world a little bit differently from the United States, from APAC, et cetera.
I think culturally there are differences in how people do business and how they go about doing governance. I think that's the big difference. That's why you see that reflected in like GDPR versus the CCPA.
Okay.
From a tech perspective, we do kind of account for those nuances. And now it's mainly coming through regulations. I mean, we're seeing that like there's more and more regulations in Europe. You had the GDPR, you have the DSA, you have the e-privacy.
Do you have like a Post-it note with all these on your desk, all the acronyms?
Not anymore. I used to do that, but the whole desk got covered.
So can you unpack what you said? You said there's differences in governance. What do you mean by that?
If you look at the privacy regulations, like I said, you have GDPR, you have DSA, you have the e-privacy, like already 3 different regulations, and then now you have the AI regulation in Europe. Whereas you look at in US, we still don't have a federal law.
Right.
But we have more independence and federal system for the states, and I have like 25 plus state laws. if you look at the CCPA, it's a simpler law compared to what you have in Europe. So that's why it's like the governance systems are different. And that gets reflected in the way they do business. If I go to another example would be like when I talk to people in Europe about they want an ID for, say, creative ID in the supply chain. Typically from Europe, you'll hear they want it structured, like first 4 letters reflect this, next 3 letters reflect this. You go to US, you'll say like, oh, let me a random GeoID. Yeah, that's all I want.
That's
So there are those kind of subtle differences.
It's very
flow into the technology.
very culturally different.
Yeah.
Do you find that the standards that you produce have different importance in the different regions?
Not as much. Like we see the same importance. It's because they bring the same efficiency. They serve the same purpose.
Right.
That doesn't matter, and that's one of the reasons that we are a global charter. That they don't matter.
So, what are the most recent and important developments from the Tech Lab?
So the recent one is in the addressability and privacy. Some of the standards we've created for data clean rooms. The work that we are doing in the OpenRDB supply chain to incorporate some of the new developments in like ID solutions and different ID systems, ID bridging. The third one that we're looking at is connected television. So we're trying to make it more efficient to be able to advertise against different mediums and different channels and be able to reconcile all that data with that creative ID framework. And then ad format idle that we just announced to standardize the ad formats for connected televisions. And there's a lot more coming in the connected television that's being worked on.
So what work went into the television formats?
So television formats is like we were getting requests like every week from somebody like, I have this new format and, can you standardize this? And some of them were really good. Some of them were, okay, fine, we can't standardize that. That's too custom. But the idea was that we can't do this like every week, right? So we said like, why don't we have a program where we invite all at once, give them like 3 months to submit everything. And then we have a committee of experts that can look at them, qualify them, shortlist them. And then we do a qualitative and quantitative survey to figure out which are the ones that are most valuable for the business transactions point of view. And then standardize them throughout the supply chain. So it's not just standardizing the format spec, but also how do you signal it in OpenRTB? Okay. How do you deliver it through VAST or any other standard that needs a change? So we do all of them all at once, and then it's all ready from end to end.
So what came out of that?
So that just launched. So
I mean, for those of us just listening on the pod, like what's the cool format that came out?
Not yet. So we're still. Oh, we just launched it like 2 weeks back. So I think we have, as of last Friday, we had 8 submissions. I can tell you some of the formats, like pause ads was one submission.
Yeah, pause ads.
So we're seeing popular. Like different flavors of pause ads being submitted. QR code is the other one.
Sure.
And there's some nuance in the QR code. Like it's not just how you display it, but also how you personalize the QR code there. I think there's a lot of work that goes into that. So those are the 2 interesting things I've heard so far from the submission.
And what's percolating? Where are people saying, well, we need to work on this, but we're not working on it yet?
That's hard to say. It's hard to recall like what people are delaying or deferring.
Or what's next? What's next for the Tech Lab?
Next is we're looking at one is privacy labs is one of the projects I'm working on personally to set up a privacy lab.
What's that?
So that's will be we want to get the industry more educated and ready for some of the privacy enhancing technologies that be integrated. So we want to help them understand differential privacy much better. You want to understand like what is K anonymity. So a lot of the time we get asked questions like, can you give us a standard like K anonymity is equal to 100? And anybody who knows a little bit of math knows that there is no answer to that. It depends on what kind of data. So
it's pretty complicated.
So we want to provide that platform where you can bring your data and you can understand like what would K anonymity mean for your data set.
Okay.
What would differential privacy result in your data set?
Yeah.
So we'll have the software and we'll have the infrastructure. So you could take the software, install it yourself and do it in your walls. Or we would provide on our tools portal that you could come and upload some data and check it out for yourself. The other thing is I've had some initial discussions with some of the academicians at some of the prestigious marketing management institutes. So I'm trying to see if we can do something with them, some sort of research in this area and publish that.
That's interesting. So does the IAB Tech Lab have an educational purpose as well?
We don't have, we like, there's no like not that we don't have or we have to have.
Yeah.
But typically IABs are the ones that are focused on education.
Right.
We did do educational program on in the last 2 years, which was pretty popular. Was on the helping policymakers understand AdTech complexity. So we used to always have full classes. Like we ran it for 2 years. We're still deciding whether we'll continue running it or maybe it has a different flavor for next year.
Sure.
But so we've done that a little bit where necessary.
Right. All right. There's a podcast, so I have to ask about audio. Audio seems like a real backwater. Nothing really interoperates or works. Is there any plans, or can you help in some way make audio advertising more efficient?
So we have like the podcast measurement and metrics working group, but it's mostly focused on metrics. So I did ask this question like 2017 and 18, like should we be doing something? People say, it's like 700 million revenue.
Well, that was 2 billion. That's 2 billion.
So at that time, they said, like, it's less than 1 billion. No, don't have to do anything. But we did start the metrics thing. And one of the reasons that the issues that is that I think I may be behind on my data, but when I did the data earlier, about 50 to 65% of the podcasts will listen on the native apps, like the Android and the Apple app. And there's nothing you can do.
Nothing to do.
So that was one of the reasons we haven't done anything. But open to, like, from your experience and others, if there's something to be done, happy to expand that group that works on it.
Yeah, we're smart enough here in Marketecture to only sell our stuff on a sponsorship basis, so there's no measurement at all. But so I'm going to keep doing that. So I just wanted to finish off by asking you, how do you get into this? How did your career land you at the IAB Tech Lab?
So I used to work in a different area until 2010. So,
different area being not advertising.
Not advertising. So I used to be working in the enterprise.
Sorry it worked out this way for you.
It's worked out, I think, for the better. I was getting bored in that, and that was the reason I wanted to switch. So I used to work in like supply chain management, of the real world, the digital world, of the actual stuff. And then I was getting bored of these are pretty matured processes and all in that world. So there was not too much innovation happening. It was like the same thing, maybe it's a better interface, a new reporting system. So then I got into, I looked at the internet and things were moving fast. And I got into advertising at a company called Say Media. Yeah. So that's where I started working in advertising. I joined them as a product manager, designing their trafficking system and creating what was probably the first transparency report. Okay. Which when showed to salespeople, nobody wanted to take it.
Yeah, no one wants transparency.
No one wants transparency. No. And then I joined Yahoo. And that's where I got introduced to IAB. I worked on the Emirate standard. Right. So that got me interested. And then I was looking for a change after my Yahoo stint. And then Tech Lab was just started then. So I joined Tech Lab. And then I've since been here. I joined with Scott Cunningham when he was the founding CEO. And he said, it's a 2-3 year gig.
And we just had the 10-year anniversary, right?
Yeah, so I've been here almost 10 years.
Well, we really appreciate the relationship that the Tech Lab and Marketecture have been building. And thank you so much for coming onto the pod. This podcast is brought to you by Sabio, a leading CTV advertising platform purpose-built to help brands effectively reach, engage, and validate streaming audiences. For over a decade, Sabio's platform has combined deep industry expertise with innovative technology to meet the needs of an evolving media landscape. Ready to unlock the power of CTV advertising? Learn more at sabio.ws/podcast. That's sabio.ws/podcast.
All right, we are back. You heard the first segment from my co-host Ari in the UK. By the way, I'm Eric Franchi. And I am here stateside with my man, Joe Zappa, my co-host at Open Market, to talk about the news of the week. What's up, Joe?
Thank you for having me on, Eric. It's AdTech's enfant terrible. I'm here to cause chaos. Daddy's gone. The leading luminary of AdTech is gone, and they subbed me in.
The inmates are running it. All right, cool. All right, so news of the week. We have, there's nothing else going on in the world, so we have a bunch of ad tech news. We've got AppLovin earnings. We've got DV finding an audio ad fraud scheme. Update on IAS. United update on their vertical media network. And Google getting into the curation game. So lots of fun stuff to talk about. Let's get it going. So AppLovin absolutely crushed earnings. They are up 39% year over year in revenue Q3, and their software revenue, which is not actually software revenue, it's advertising revenue, up 66%. So we're recording this on Thursday afternoon, November 7th. As of last night, November 6th, interestingly, AppLovin and TTD were roughly the same market cap. They're both publicly traded companies. They were both in the 57-ish plus or minus $1 billion market cap range. As of today, AppLovin is up 43%. So AppLovin is now the most valuable independent ad tech company at an $80 billion market cap. What do you think of that, Joe?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I was talking to Tim and Chris Vanderhook from Viant earlier today about this, and they had some good points. What they were saying is that the market caps of Trade Desk and AppLovin might be similar, but they're actually extremely different companies. And it's obviously not just that AppLovin is a mobile company and the Trade Desk primarily isn't. It's that AppLovin really coheres with the paradigm that Google and Meta have set around outcomes, right? Like I wrote this newsletter this week about how we're essentially in the outcomes era that products like PMax and Advantage Plus have built, where tech companies just say to advertisers, tell us what outcomes you want and we'll deliver them, right? And my understanding is that's the magic of AppLovin, is that it essentially does that, but specifically for a segment of advertisers, which is, mobile publishers, games, direct response advertisers, e-com companies who tend to be obsessed with performance. And so AppLovin has seemed to have built a business that replicates a lot of the magic of the walled gardens through its own kind of semi-walled garden, which is like mobile, but also their own owned and operated mobile ecosystem.
Yeah. Well said. As I understand it, the focus to date has really been on the mobile app ecosystem and mobile apps, which comprise most of the revenue. I think there's actually a lot more headroom, a lot more growth to come as they expand out to not just focus on serving the mobile app ecosystem, but to your point, serving e-com brands, serving D2C, and ultimately, I think, serving brands. So they've just been on an absolute tear. Two other things on this. Number one, I am happy that they changed their labeling. This is like the most minute thing, but as a person that invests in ad tech and tries to champion investing in ad tech, this is super important. So software revenue has never been software revenue. It has been largely advertising revenue. So they are putting a stake in the ground and basically said from here on out, we are labeling this segment to be advertising revenue, which is great. And the market's rewarding them for having a advertising business. So I think that's like super important, number one. And then number two, it's funny, Joe, you're on ad tech Twitter all day. I'm on ad tech Twitter when you drag me into it. But it's like everybody talks about the same handful of companies, right? Google, Meta, Amazon. It's amazing how now the most valuable company, publicly traded company in ad tech, continues to be slept on. Nobody talks about them outside of Eric Seufert.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I think the Trade Desk looms so large because so many open market ad tech companies compete with them.
Yeah, and Trade Desk, obviously, missed by me, yeah.
Yeah, but the Trade Desk is, they do full funnel advertising, whereas I think AppLovin has, again, just built this giant business helping mobile app publishers drive installs. But then also, to your point, cohering with this performance advertising paradigm that's dominated the industry and built the giant businesses that are Google and Meta. And yeah, they probably do have a lot of room to grow. I also love that you're looking out for number one. You're like, most importantly, they're relabeling their revenue advertising, which is bullish for me and the ad tech ecosystem. Apropos of which, you mentioned Eric Seufert, and he published something interesting about ad tech AI startups and how the benefits of AI investment will mainly accrue to the big players who have all the training data and the legions of engineers who are focused on AI. I was curious for your perspective on that and your sort of view of the ad tech AI opportunity, especially for startups that are not, Google and Meta.
I had a very dry response to your asks to join the fray, which was, it was just factual, which is, and I'm paraphrasing myself, and I don't like doing this, but effectively, some of the most exciting companies and some of the highest growth companies, as defined by year-over-year revenue increases in the Imperium portfolio, which is ad tech, are AI startups. The reason why I think people are properly focused on the value that accrues to the large platforms is AI for using algorithmic campaigns to drive outcomes, right? So if you have the data, you have the AI and ML, and you can start to feed it with like more and more advertisers, more and more ads, a large audience, you get it. I think the thing that, some people don't keep in mind when thinking about AI is that AI is going to transform every part of our space. So we have companies that are focused on AI for workflow, like the most boring parts of the ecosystem, but the parts that can most benefit from AI, workflow, ad operations, account management, like that's the stuff that, like is just incredible. We have companies that are focused on like using AI for measurement, right? So it's absolutely the large platforms are going to be, like the leaders in this stuff. But there's so much opportunity. There's so much headroom for independent startups to go after like every part of the, equation and value chain using AI. So we continue to be super bullish on the category.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a really big pie, and there will be plenty of pie to eat for those who aren't just Google and Meta. And it also goes to another fact about the ecosystem, which is people will often say, and I've heard Ari say this, for example, on his Justify Your Existence segment, why wouldn't Google and Meta just kill you? And like the fact of the matter is, yeah, there are a lot of businesses Google and Meta could go into and kill off competitors, but they also just like, they're not going to go after every single opportunity. So that alone also provides a lot of cover for ad tech AI startups to claim their own territory.
Totally. Well said. All right, let's keep it moving. So DV, Double Verify, finds an audio ad fraud scheme. This is so weird. So Double Verify found that white noise apps do you use a white noise app?
I don't use a white noise app. I do use a white noise.
Like a machine, right?
Sort of thing I use a thing on Spotify. Like it's essentially,
right.
Yeah. It's not its own app, but it's just like an album or something.
Yeah, so I have like a white noise machine, for want of a better term, in my room. Like it's totally analog. But when traveling, white noise via Spotify has been my go-to. But apparently, there's this like collection of white noise apps for those that don't use Spotify, and they are being used for ad fraud. So there are schemes that DV found called Beat Sting and FM Scam that are using spoofed IPs and counterfeit servers, resulting in, according to DV, over $1 million in monthly losses for advertisers. So basically, people are sleeping. And like these like fraudsters are like running, I guess, display ads and just refreshing and billing advertisers. So it's awful. Some of these apps that they found are called Deep Sleep and Deep Sleep Kids, and they're basically just like generating fake impressions. So this is awful, and good on DV for finding this. Apparently, this has been estimated losses of $225,000 per app. So it's good they stopped this stuff out, and it just amazes me that these things go on. I mean, these things have been going on for as long as the industry has been around. I guess the whack-a-mole game of ad quality continues. What you got?
Yeah, fraud will never go away. I was saying earlier that we're in the outcomes era, but I think there's a countervailing force of anxiety in that era, which is a preoccupation about quality. And I think that's what we've seen this year, is especially with the rise and evolution of AI, advertisers know that increasingly they're being told by tech players, like, just give us the budget and we'll figure it out. Don't worry about where the dollars are going. Well, that spurs a contrary anxiety, which is like, some people are like, okay, yes, like we're glad that we're getting our outcomes overall, but there's also a lot of trash in this ecosystem, right? In the open web, in the mobile app ecosystem. And so that's where I think that anxiety is like bubbling up into something salient, where you have like the anti-MFA craze, you have the curation phenomenon, you have the trade desks shifting from the open internet to the premium internet and launching things like SP 500 plus. I think that all of these anxieties about fraud are converging, and they are driving interest in new products, new trends that are all about, yes, we want outcomes, but we also want to make sure we're buying quality inventory and we're not wasting money while in the pursuit of those outcomes.
But it's just like, if you see as an advertiser, I wish we had Jay Friedman on from Goodway Group on the pod here, because he always likes to say like Goodway clients are never in the middle of this stuff because they look at where the ads are delivered. And if you see a disproportionate amount of your budget going towards Deep Sleep Kids or Deep Sleep, and you're just like some B2B brand, like you should be looking at that stuff. And it's just amazing to me that people don't look at these reports.
You're just not thinking creatively about this. Like the kids are buying HubSpot in their sleep. Like HubSpot is seeding these kids to one day grow up and be B2B SaaS drones who are living in their CRM. That's the Galaxy Brain version of this. That's not yet obvious, but people are going to see it in due time.
Okay. All right. So it's the non-obvious. Okay. Look at your post-campaign reports, people. Related on DV, Chris Harhar on, did I say his name right?
I think so.
That's your buddy, right?
Yeah, I think
he's my buddy too. Cool. He posted something, I think from the earnings of DV, that they won 70% of the RFPs that they participated in for remote clients. So they did real well in the fallout of Oracle going out of the ad biz.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be too congratulatory to DV for our journals, but it could be interesting to know why, they're winning 70%, presumably IAS is winning the other 30%. I mean, it's often been remarked that DV and IAS are such similar companies, and it's not immediately clear, I think, to people on the outside, like why DV has a significantly larger market cap. And maybe, I don't know, there's something to that that's driving them getting 70% of those deals. Maybe it's random, or maybe it is the fact that DV is already the market leader and is larger that is, accruing more spoils to their side.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. Hey, speaking of IAS, just one quick follow-up from last week. We talked about how IAS was getting some inbound interest from potential acquirers. So there was an update. I think Business Insider had the scoop here that apparently IAS is indeed in discussions, allegedly, with KKR, the big PE firm. So this makes sense. A take private allows them to theoretically kind of do some work, continue to innovate, continue to kind of figure out how they compete against such a competitor like DV without the scrutiny of public markets. Having seen this before, I can imagine a couple of scenarios if indeed this happens, and it might not happen at all. It's number one, typically it's not just one PE, it could be some syndicate of a couple of partners that get together to do this. So it'd be interesting to see if it happens, who the sort of bedfellows are. And then number two, oftentimes this is not the deal, but it's like the first deal. So there could be, other roll-ups in play for other verification companies, measurement companies. So worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, IAS is an interesting company, right? Because again, they seem so similar to DV from the outside. Everyone always talks about them together. They're talking about DV and IAS when they're talking about the ad verification market. Therefore, it's natural to wonder, why. I mean, overall, they perform decently, but it's like, why is DV significantly larger if from the outside they don't seem to have superior technology, which, I've talked to people in the market about that, and I don't think it's clear that DV is just like the superior option on product alone. I think IAS is also like, they have the Publica acquisition they made, right? They have like kind of contextual targeting product. They were involved in this Google curation announcement that we're going to talk about, with Google launching curation services in GAM. So there's a lot of different stuff they're doing, and I'm sure they're investigating trajectories that will allow them to maximize the value of that and maybe level the playing field.
Makes a ton of sense. And with new entrants coming in, I think it's needed. All right, let's keep it moving. So United launched their vertical ad net at Cannes. It's a few months later, and they just had another announcement. This is kind of cool. So their network targets passengers with, presumably personalized ads on screens, on the seat backs, in the app, and on the site, because you always need to go to the app or the site to activate Wi-Fi and pay for it. They are partnering with Starlink, an Elon Musk company, to offer free Starlink-powered Wi-Fi starting next year. So this is pretty cool. So you've got no reason for someone not to open the app, open the website, start to interact on the web during the flight and the seat back. So you've got what will hopefully be a growing audience, and then obviously they've got their Mileage Plus members. So they've got the data for that. They can start to do some cool targeted in-flight captive audience advertising. So I think this thing is still pretty nascent. My sense from the news was that, there's a handful of early brands, and they're obviously looking to scale this next year. So this is kind of cool. I think a cool partnership, cool way to drive like more usage, because I think, being in the air, you really have a couple hours or longer to capture user attention and serve ads. And it's a neat way to I think maximize the opportunity. What you think, Jeff?
Yeah, contextual advertising opportunity. We're constantly talking about privacy changes and how to leverage first-party data and then also contextual signals to drive advertising outcomes. I mean, this is a pretty good way, right? You know who they are because you have United's first-party data, and they can leverage that to help advertisers, but also you're reaching an audience that probably has a disproportionate amount of disposable income because they're traveling in the first place. Business class travelers in particular might be valuable. You know who's a first class traveler, so you can like target them with luxury products. And then I don't know if there's like a sort of offsite commerce media element to this, but I feel like that this should also be an opportunity for United's advertisers to collect data on like who's sort of interacting, but maybe not quite purchasing, and then maybe even retarget them offsite. So it speaks to the opportunity that has led commerce media to be one of the two fastest growing channels in advertising, along with CTV, as far as I know.
I do wonder what the opportunity is from, just like a contextual and a creative perspective, to, capture the attention of a person like on a flight, right? And can a brand and with United say, hey, we know that this person is on a flight in their chair, like maybe they're bored enough to purchase something, maybe not, but can they do something to recognize the context of the situation and do some fun stuff? I hope that's the case.
Yeah, there could be signals about or patterns regarding mindset. Like, are people actually more likely to buy something when they're traveling?
Maybe.
Are they less likely? What sorts of things do they buy? Like, there's so much rich signal you would get from that kind of situation. And I'm sure, they'll be able to leverage it. And I mean, Uber, speaking of other commerce media businesses, like Uber has built a giant ads business. $1 billion. So it's not so surprising to see another transportation company targeting this opportunity.
Are there airlines doing this? Like, are there other airline ad nets that you know of?
I think there are, but I couldn't name one for sure off the top of my head.
Yeah. I mean, it's a no-brainer. They should all do this.
Yeah. I think it's happening. It's well underway.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. All right. Let's talk curation. You're all over this whole curation thing, Joe. Why are you so obsessed with curation?
I have a client that is very big on curation, Azerian, so they're part of what keeps me clued in on it. But also, a lot of my clients had an interest in it and wanted to weigh in on it once the topic was bubbling up. I mean, to me, again, it is about this counter movement where it's like the dominant paradigm is outcomes. Just give me outcomes. I don't care how you do it. But the anti-MFA buzz that accumulated earlier in the year has just been the tip of the spear in driving this industry focus on quality. Not, I think, as something that's going to overtake the emphasis on outcomes, because ultimately, like, marketers want to tell their boss that they're hitting KPIs and they're driving growth, and that won't change. But in AI, I think will only exacerbate that. There is also, again, this desire to make sure that while we're getting these outcomes, we're buying quality inventory and we're finding our audiences efficiently, et cetera. And to me, that's what curation is all about, is just applying audience data to inventory to find audiences as efficiently as possible. And so it's interesting in that context that you see the creator of PMax, the ultimate will just deliver the outcomes company, also saying, will offer curation. So I think you see Google sort of saying like, hey, we're going to drive the outcomes, but also if you're concerned about how we're doing it and you want to make sure you're getting high quality inventory, we will also be on top of that.
Yeah. This is, I think, like real validation of this whole curation thing. The fact that Google is now getting into the game because they see this as a market trend, I think this is like real validation. So it's pretty awesome. And they're partnering with great companies. So a couple of companies in our portfolio, Audigen Scope 3, they're partnering with LiveRamp, they're partnering with IAS to bring this to market. So I think that, you teed this up in the notes here, right? Like, Google's got a lot of advantages. Google's got advantages because it's the ad server. Every publisher use it. They've got the data. They've got obviously the integrations with all these companies. I think they could, take a lead in curation, pretty handily.
Scott Messer has this framework where he says the curation phenomenon split into two categories of companies. There are curation houses, which would be like Audigent, Azerion, Lotame, Multilocal, like these DMP, next-gen DMP type companies. And then there are curation platforms, which are the SSPs who are, taking those curated audiences and activating them for advertisers. Index Exchange, I think, has been big on this. Xandr has a curation product. So Google, obviously also as the owner of an SSP, is now essentially competing with them to offer and activate curated audiences. And yeah, Google has obviously unparalleled data and a giant advertiser demand base. So, that was part of what drove the whole antitrust trial over the past few months. And Google will have a major advantage in terms of leveraging this.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. All right, cool. That's the news of the week, folks. Joe Zappa, thanks as always for coming in and doing the job. You did great.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.
All right. With that, Ari, hope you get home safe, and we'll see everybody next week. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.
Thank you for listening to the Marketecture podcast. New episodes come out every Friday, and an insightful vendor interview is published each Monday. You can subscribe to our library of hundreds of executive interviews at marketecture.tv. You can also sign up for free for our weekly newsletter with my original strategic insights on the week's news at news.marketecture.tv. And if you're feeling social, we operate a vibrant Slack community that you can apply to join at adtechgod.com.